Okay, dokie.
Okay, so should we just go with the updates first, I guess,
Yeah, let's
quickly?
try to keep these short, but
Yeah,
shepherded updates, const evaluation.
we
Rip
can't hear you. We can't hear you.
No.
Here we go. Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Okay, yeah. So I wasn't here the last 2 weeks, but if and match are now implemented and available on Nightly. If anybody was not aware of that, yeah. But beyond that, I've just been working on fixing bugs, as well as other people who have been doing more of the bug fixing.
Wonderful news.
Very cool. There's no major updates for FFI Unwind. Still, no people were sick and vacations and things, but we still want to get some. Basically, just waiting to get some measurements. I think that's before we try to decide the approach on for whether whether to have two different ABIs or what. In terms of the DIN trade unsoundness, I did a little bit of analysis of the breakage that we were seeing in the crater run. I identified some more patterns, but not a lot. I have to put more time into that.
So how much is it? Like how many crates? Root crates are we talking?
I don't have the number off the top of my head. I want to say less than 100. Like root crates, not that many root crates, but enough that it's noticeable.
Okay, so it's like not MLL level problems.
Right, I haven't found any cases. When I say breakage, what I mean specifically is crates that would be required to opt in to, like, to add a DIN keyword to their trait, even in 2015, in order to opt into that. So it's not. I haven't found anything yet that like wouldn't work. Or actually, the other thing I wanted to be looking for is what would require specialization to work, and I actually haven't found a lot of those cases either, which is good. But it might be nice to find. I'm still hoping to find some way to accept a little more things without a keyword, though. I mean, I think we could. Anyway, I'll try to put more time into that for next time.
As a quick procedural note on that one, I think there would be value in some future meeting of talking about the problem for that one, not just the solution, because in particular, I personally would not be wildly in favor of the you must opt into allowing your trait to be used with Dyn approach. And I think I would be much happier with something that says, no, really, you shouldn't be able to impl traits for Dyn anything, which is an entirely different approach.
Well, that's just not possible. We have things in the standard library that impl for Dyn.
It's like Annie.
Yeah, so we might be able to do something. I agree. I think we should have a dedicated meeting to talk about it's like a reasonable change.
I think it'd be worth having that discussion, and I think part of the issue is it requires a certain strong level of background to even understand the issue to the level that we're talking about of what's possible and what isn't possible. So it would be worth having a meeting in which there is time available for such questions and understanding.
Yes, I agree.
Tag theory with Nico.
Maybe a good next step.
I think we all want that.
I wrote here drafting an RFC, but maybe a good next step is I can try to prepare some sort of summary, and which I would need for the RFC anyway, and we can schedule a meeting to talk about it. I would like to have it done anyway because I want to start talking about it. Like I want to post a blog post or start getting people aware that there might be a change happening and that we should be thinking about it. So, all right.
Yeah. Only thing I was thinking is that when you said maybe we should try, maybe we could accept more code. Let's be careful that we make sure everything is sound when we do that.
I think that's a good idea. I'm assuming no grammar updates.
No, at least not that I know. Well, it's possibly relevant that I've been working on refactoring the parser, which ostensibly makes the grammar more clear.
Okay. That's the Rusty parser, I assume.
Yep.
Okay. So we wanted to move a little quickly because Josh wanted to bring up two proposals to kind of create new shepherding groups. We don't have a huge quorum from Lang team here today, which is a bit of a shame, but that's okay. We'll just do it anyway. Let's talk about it anyway, especially because we have some special guests. Hi, Ryan. Hi, Amanu.
Hello.
So we were going to talk first about safe transmute. And I'm going to take the unusual step, an experimental step of actually setting a timer to try to keep us somewhat on task because we have a couple things to cover. But Josh or Ryan, does one of you want to start? Give a little background.
I can give the 30-second overview. We're looking to solve the problem of being able to safely transmute in memory from one type to another. The goal is to be able to move directly from reference to T to reference to U, or in particular to a reference to a slice of bytes. And we would also like to support mutable transmutes that are similarly safe in cases where that would not lead to any undefined behavior. So we'd like to solve that problem. We've had several pre-RFCs on the internals forum. Those are still under active discussion. Without getting too far into solution space, we believe there are ways of solving this problem, and we'd like to talk about, is this a problem that would be reasonable to solve within the language and library? And are we willing to delegate the solution of that problem via the shepherding process and say, hey, check back in when you have more of the solution?
So, okay. All right, so specifically what we're talking about is creating like a repository, sort of a shepherding entry here that we'll check in on, and kind of a commitment on our part to pay attention and help resolve questions that come up when needed, right? Is that right?
Mm.
Yes.
So it's been an idea that's been around for a while. I'm in favor. One question I have, I saw some discussion about whether this should take place outside of the language. Is that all like on the internal stuff? I'm pretty out of date. Is there a clear need
so
for
I can see that as well. I can summarize briefly. The proposal that we have would require some language assistance in order for the compiler to verify that a type actually meets the requirements to derive a trait. And it's certainly possible that there are other proposals that could be done either with proc macros or unsafe traits or libraries or similar. But our current proposal does require language team support and language and compiler support. So we think it's appropriate to delegate it from the language team. And if the conclusion goes in the direction of, well, we don't actually need language support after all, then we would report that in and say, okay, maybe this should be redelegated from libs, for example.
Yeah, I think copy is the most is the analog here. That's right. Basically, we would need to add some checks to coherence to make sure that we enforce the checks that is required.
Yeah, debug is another good example. You can't implement debug if all of your fields don't.
No, you can't.
No.
Sorry, rephrasing. You can't derive debug if all of your fields don't.
No, I don't think that's analogous.
That falls out
It's
from
the type parameters that it's parameterized. It's predicated on, not the fields, right?
Yeah. So what happens with debug is that the syntactic expansion in the macro just creates type errors, and well, that's also what happens with copy. But the special thing about copy is that we have coherence checks in the compiler that like if you write impl copy for bar and all the fields in bar are not copy, then you will get a type error. And
right.
It doesn't have anything to do with
then copy is a better example because we're looking to have the compiler check both derive and impl. partly because there are types for which you can write an impl, but you can't easily write a derive because you're not defining them. You are defining a part of them syntactically.
I think it should also be mentioned that there are definitely extensions to this RFC that we either want to make in this round or in a future RFC that would require changes to the language, in particular safe union reads, where that is, as far as I know, completely impossible to do outside of the language.
That's right. And so that is, I guess, one other question would be the overall scope, which seems to be, I mean, we would start with some version of safe transmute and maybe go further to go to like safe union reads and so on.
That is the goal, yes.
So it
we
would
have
be
a
good
proposal for safe union, but we're expecting that proposal needs to wait for a second round.
So with respect to safe unions, it would be good to see, okay, if we do this, how does that impact the future proposal, and like making sure that we have the options we want open to us and stuff, and versus some other solution that perhaps wouldn't be compatible with safe unions. But it would be good to elaborate on like safe unions as well in like future possibilities and stuff in the RFC.
Okay. So yes, the proposed scope includes safe transmute between types and bytes, bytes and types directly, or mutable references to mutable references. The proposed scope also includes safe union field reads under limited circumstances.
Okay.
So I think in terms of compiler complexity, it feels mostly isolated to some changes to coherence, which is pretty isolated, and it already has an analog, so it's not super novel. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. So does anyone object to moving forward with this? I think in general I would like to see an RFC for creating project groups, but I'm curious whether anyone present here objects. If so, maybe we can go to the next. If not, maybe we can go to the next option.
GNZ LBG, their name is so hard to pronounce, also has some work in this area, I think. So you might
we are
want to
looking at that. We are absolutely looking at the past work in this area from several different people.
I think they have
I
new
believe
work
they
as well.
weren't referring to their past work. They were referring to other people's past work that we should be looking at. We may want to pull some of those folks in.
I think they were messaging me about some new work they were doing. I think.
About what? Sorry.
Safe transmutes or like versions.
I spoke with them about safe transmute, and they are discussing in the thread, but the proposals that they're linking to are a few different things. So we can review.
Can someone drop a link to the internals thread in here?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Sure, I will drop one.
I would just like to make one quick shout out that this has been my first time proposing a change to the language, and having Josh's help on that has been super invaluable. So +1 to some kind of process that allows for that, because it's I don't think I would be able to do this without that. So
thank you. I really appreciate that.
That's good. Yeah.
I feel the same way about my first RFC several years ago.
Words of more perfect union?
That's the one.
Still working on unions. All right. So
I do like unions.
Is it resolved since the meeting? This is a good, we have enough people, we think we'll be able to pull this forward. We're okay with that. Confirm.
In favor, obviously.
It seems like.
All right.
Seems like it's go.
Sounds good.
Cancel the timer. We squeaked in with 1 minute to spare. It's awesome. All right.
Well, with that remaining minute, quick procedural question. What is the next step? Is the proposal that we are delegating the group now, or is the proposal that someone needs to write a brief RFC saying, let's delegate the group?
So what we did with the FFI unwind was we wrote a brief RFC and we made a rustling repo and a Zulip stream. I'm in favor of that, but I don't think those things have to be blocked on one another. Like we can make the Zulip stream in the repo. I don't think there's really, in other words, I think an RFC is a good exercise of just writing it out and also letting people know this is where it's happening. But I don't expect major controversy that will cause us to reverse course. Of course, if that happens, we'll deal. But like,
it's fine by me. I assume Josh will be the liaison.
That's my assumption.
Yes, I am happy to do so.
This is the.
Cool.
Okay, so let's talk about inline assembly. Amaniu, or whomever wants to talk.
Sure. So I posted a PRFC on internals, which was based on an earlier PRFC by Florian. Basically, the plan is to first, we're going to rename the existing ASM to LLVM ASM and mark the current ASM as deprecated so people have some time to transition. And afterwards, we're going to basically change the semantics of the ASM macro, which should be fine since it's currently unstable.
Wait. I want to be clear about this. Hold on. You're gonna deprecate something before you've actually released whatever people are supposed to ship to.
Well, we're going to rename it.
And
we're going to rename ASM exclamation mark to LLVM ASM exclamation mark and put a deprecation note on users of ASM to migrate to LLVM ASM.
Oh wait. Maybe I'm not understanding something. When you say the steps here, are you talking about like just all these things are going to happen as one atomic thing with a release of this thing, or are you talking about like we first do the deprecation?
No. We first do the deprecation with a warning that the semantics of ASM are going to change.
Can I make a procedural note here?
Yes.
Even the proposal to deprecate ASM and move it to LOVM ASM or ASM LOVM or whatever we end up calling it would be a step requiring an RFC and consensus. So assuming that we agree in this meeting to delegate the problem of stable, maintainable inline assembly syntax, then that group would be chartered, and the first RFC it would likely come out with is we propose to rename this macro that's currently unstable. The second RFC would be here is a new syntax for assembly. But this is not, we're not in this meeting asking for consensus on that proposal. In this meeting, we're asking for consensus on delegating the problem. And then one such proposal from that group would be, let's rename ASM.
Okay, sorry for the distraction.
So I think the question of LLVM ASM, and that seems like a purely piloting question to me.
But what's the end state we want to get? Like we're trying to get to.
So the end state we're trying to get to is one in which the ASM macro is using a syntax that we can maintain and more easily write, and that we feel that we can stabilize without depending on the idiosyncrasies of LLVM's assembly format. And there's a specific proposal in a pre-RFC, but the idea is if the ASM macro uses a syntax we believe we can support without just saying, well, it'll only ever work on LLVM and depends so much on LLVM that if you look at it funny, it gives you internal compiler errors, which is the case today. If we have that syntax that people are happy with, then we will be on a path to being able to stabilize that syntax, whereas there's a lot of feeling like the current ASM may not be stabilizable in its current form.
Right. This has definitely been long been a dream, and obviously it moves towards the maturity goal. One question I have is sort of, Amanio, are you interested in doing the implementation work as well?
Sure, I can help with that.
Like, I feel like that would...
okay, I can do it. I might need a bit of help for some of the compiler details, but I can definitely work on the implementation.
Okay, so I think that would be one of my concerns is, like, are we actually, I don't want us to just sort of make up specs without really pushing on it. On the other hand, I feel like the implementation is, I would call it moderate complexity. Like, it's not, I don't think
it's pretty self-contained.
Compiler.
I definitely don't agree with that. That it's self-contained. I actually removed Inline assembly from the compiler, and it wasn't in a branch, and it wasn't self-contained at all.
I mean, it touches lots of parts, but not. There will be things we have to figure out, like how the borrow check should treat it and so on. But those things are mostly not dependent on.
Yeah, well, I mean,
moderate.
It pervasively touches the compiler throughout the whole pipeline. Like it's not a bunch of checks here and there in various parts of the pipeline, but it's there in all parts of the pipeline, and especially in borrow checker.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely moderate, maybe even more, somewhat above moderate, but it's worth it.
I think it's something like 1,500 lines of code right now, just for in the Rust C code base, and not including LVM, which of course is much more.
Is there any expectation to support, like, what about architectures beyond x86?
So the current version of the PRFC has x86, ARM, ARM64, and RISC-V.
And the expectation is that it would be supported on every architecture that Rust has a backend for that has an assembler, if we can.
Sure. The idea is that we will add support basically as the demand grows.
Right. Our expectation is that the incremental work to add support for inline assembly for the second and subsequent architectures will mostly consist of what are the names of the registers you're allowed to use, and how do we plumb this through to the back ends. So there is no desire to make it fully understand the instructions at this time. We might at someday have a lint that tries to check such things, but there's no major overhauls required to support a new architecture, and the proposal is portable.
Okay, so it's not that it deeply parses the assembly or something?
No, we specifically said we do not want to parse the assembly.
Well, if you don't deeply parse the assembly, then the consequence of that is that you get post-modern modification errors instead. Well, you can always if the type is generic, we don't allow you to use it. But
those would be the two options, yes.
Even so, you would still get post-morphization errors.
This is already a problem now. So as someone who uses a lot of inline assembly, cargo check doesn't actually validate that your assembly code is correct because it never gets parsed by LLVM. So any assembler level errors would only happen in the backend post-monomorphization.
Right. Yes.
And I don't think this is something that we can really avoid.
Unless we understand assembly in the front end. Well, not in LVM. Then we could avoid it, but then it would add massive complexity to the language.
How do we understand this in terms of priorities? I mean, I guess it's coming down to that we're pushing on sort of C parity, right?
Yeah, this is roughly speaking priority, either the top or the second from the top priority for C parity. A lot of people want this. A lot of systems programmers want this. We want this so we can do stable syscalls. We want this so that we can do implementations of magic, other calling conventions, any kind of ring 0 level programming or equivalent supervisor level or VM level programming.
I feel that this is a feature which is keeping a lot of people on Nightly at the moment.
Or on C.
Or on C.
Well, standard C doesn't even have inline assembly.
Nobody doing this is writing standard C. They're writing GCC, or they're writing MSVC, but mostly they're writing GCC.
Yeah, definitely. Okay.
Rust actually has a really compelling advantage over GCC in this particular context, or C in general, in that if we have a stable, portable, inline assembler syntax, we have one compiler on all platforms. And currently there are projects that say, well, here's the inline assembly for GCC and here's the inline assembly for Visual C, or similar things.
Yeah, similar to, I think D has a very nice inline assembly.
Oh, interesting.
So
it does, but D has two inline assembly. One which is x86 only, which actually understands the instruction, and the other one which is what Rust has at the moment, which directly plumbs through to LLVM.
I see. Okay, I guess my next question is, who would be who are the people that we see pulling this design forward? Does you, Josh, are you going to be considering yourself a liaison? Or are you going to be stretched too thin?
I am likely to actively participate in the development of this, quite aside from being a liaison, and I have no problem with, if we decide that the upper bound on projects that one can be a liaison on are either 2 or 3, I have no problem with these being 2, because these are 2 of the most important things that I care about right now.
Okay. Well, I'm in favor of giving it a go. I think these are important things to pursue, and if you think you have the bandwidth to pull it off, that seems okay with me. I think the main thing that's blocked us in the past has been a sense of who has the energy to dig into this problem.
Yep. And I want to point something out, by the way. Frankly, the blocker is not my bandwidth to be the liaison. The thing that has unblocked this is the fact that Amaniyu has had a boundless energy to actually write up the proposal. Yeah, all credit there. I am just kind of helping it along, not actually doing the bulk of the work.
The you in my sentence was meant to be plural for the 2 of you,
okay.
But I guess that wasn't clear. Well, I think
so. So when we say that the compiler complexity is moderate, well, that's in Rust C. But what about Greenlift? So at least from my perspective, the base minimum that I would need to see to be comfortable with inline assembly on stable, it would be to have the Greenlift backend usable in Rust C and inline assembly usable in that one as well. And at least from their perspective, it seems like they think that adding inline assembly would add a lot of complexity to the register allocator and so on.
So
it's probably true.
This is actually addressed in the PRC, because we can implement inline assembly support entirely in Rust C with no backend support, as long as we can invoke an external assembler.
How do you
basically wrap the inline assembly around function call?
It's not as efficient, but the requirement is not every backend must support this perfectly efficiently. It's every backend should probably support this.
Especially given Greenlift is meant to be unoptimized.
Yeah, so if we compile inline assembly into a separate object file with a symbol that you can enter that moves things into the right registers, runs the assembly, moves things back into the right registers, and returns, then that technically works.
And the prologue and epilogue of the function is not a problem.
It's just generated by so Rusty would generate a prologue and epilogue, which sets up the registers correctly for the inline assembly.
Okay.
What about things like in the past, we have a sort of unstable extension around naked functions, which I think was like used for redox or something like that.
So I'd consider this as sort of step 2. Once we have the new ASM implemented, then we can look into 2 things, which is naked functions and global ASM.
Yes.
But they're not exactly a priority at the moment. Okay.
I totally agree that they would be secondary. I was just curious whether you had thought about them and had any desire to maybe tackle some of that follow-up work. Not a commitment.
Yes, there's some in the future extensions of the pre-RC. There's some stuff we can do to global ASM to make it support constant operands that get substituted in. But
right.
that's future work.
I want to intervene on the timing grounds that I want to have time to talk about the regression in error conversion. I think we kind of covered this topic. If the next step is an RFC, then
I think next step is the same as the
right.
Safe transmute.
And I guess that would be the question. Does anyone object? Yay or nay? And if you say nay, then we'll take it offline.
To reiterate the scope before we vote up or down here or get consensus, we're saying we want to define a new assembly syntax, provide a transition story for the current ASM macro, define what happens for non-LLVM backends in a reasonable way, and that may include here's how it works, here's how it integrates, here's how it doesn't, but we need a story for that. Handling naked functions in the future by either transition or interoperability, and handling global ASM.
Yes.
All right.
And in all cases, it delegates to an external assembler, right? I'm trying to make sure I understand.
No, to handle crane lift, we would delegate to an external assembler. For LLVM, we would feed it into LLVM so that it can be optimized, inline, handled as part of register allocation, all of that.
So Robin made the points in the internal thread. I haven't read everything, but recently, but they made the point that this sounds like speculation. Like it would actually need to be implemented to not be speculation. So yeah,
I developed on this and provided a full example, including all the assembly code of how this would get expanded.
Okay.
All right.
But okay, it would be good to see it implemented also.
I think honestly, we take this concern to the RFC if we have it, right?
Yeah, I think this is worth taking a moment to mention. The only case I can imagine where it will be even remotely difficult to implement an external function that you can just call and return from will be one in which you have too many registers defined as either inputs or output, such that you don't have enough spares to shuffle things around, in which case the Rust compiler would have to carefully move things to memory and then have room to move things, but other things into registers. And that's still a thing Rust knows how to do. It just would be slightly more difficult.
Right. Take it offline. Gotta move.
Okay.
Yes, okay.
Less consensus than last time, but I think an RFC at least seems valid.
Really quick, in order to follow this discussion, like a repo would be really helpful because there's a ton of orthogonal concerns related to this.
Yeah, I think that would be the next
internal thread has gotten out of hand. There's too many issues being addressed.
I tried to follow along.
And I would especially like to see involvement from, for example, Robin and Alex Creighton and the Brainlift people. Like having them be comfortable with this would go a long way.
Yep. So let's talk about this regression. If you all those of you who don't care about this, feel free to drop off.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Amaniu, for joining the meeting, and I look forward to working with both of you.
Actually,
also stay. Up to you.
Actually, the name type thingy is relevant for libs, so you could perhaps.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we landed bang without fallback, and we're hitting some regressions. Perhaps, I think the problem is, oh, right, there's a good example of it here. The problem is, what is the problem? I actually forget. Oh, I know what it is. It's that it's kind of subtle, but if you see in this call, all the types are specified, everything's fine. Here, this type argument is not specified. It is expected to come from the type of the parameter, but what happens is, due to the details of how type inference and bang work, when you reference an expression of type bang, what winds up happening is that we kind of eagerly create a type variable here that saying that this could turn into any type that it might need to be. And the problem is that that type variable falls back to unit, because that's, which is a bit surprising actually, but that's right now there's only one kind of fallback type, which is used the same for the result of an expression like this, which had type bang, and the result of an expression like return or break, or so on. And both of them fall back to unit if they're not otherwise constrained. And so in this case, there are no other constraints. It could be any type. You could put any type here and it would work, essentially, as long as there were an impl. And so we end up falling back to unit. And then when we fall back to unit, we don't have an impl, and so we get an error. And this affects some amount of crates. I don't know. Does anyone have a figure? Certainly, it's been reported by a number of people.
We haven't tested it in Crater, so we have no idea.
Yeah, I just know that there are a number of reports, and I've also gotten a couple people pinging me that were not on this list. So there's been some investigation. Simone wrote up a little list here of kind of things we can do. And we should talk it over and think about which ones.
Right, that they meant to be an exhaustive, at least there's everything they could think of, honestly.
Yeah, it's pretty complete.
Right, I guess we could go through them. So if we do nothing, we cause a bunch of regressions. I think a lot of us on the thread, including myself, but maybe not everyone in this room, feel that's too many. We could, the other option down here, number 7, I'll just skip to that for a second, is we can revert and go back to the previous state and try again. Then obviously we avoid the regressions for the time being, but we also don't have a stable bang. Number 2 is sort of, we could go ahead and change the fallback to bang, which we didn't want to do before because there was concerns about it causing UB in certain code patterns. And we wanted to try to get some mitigations or better lints. And we could do it without those. That would fix this issue because it wouldn't fall back to unit anymore. I guess that's number 3. Number 2 is we just do everything perfectly in infinite time. I think that's unlikely. So number 4 is maybe we can find a way to fix these regressions without changing all the fallback. And I think there might be a way, but it would come down to having 2 kinds of fallback. Like if the value came from an expression of type bang, it would fall back to bang. If the value came from an abrupt expression like return or break or whatever, it would fall back to unit, like in the old behavior. And then we might change that particular thing to be consistent.
How do you detect which is which?
Well, the return, it's like literally when you type a return expression, you would create a type variable for its type, which this is what we used to do at least. You wouldn't assign it the type bang, you would assign it a type variable, which has a fallback to unit. And everything else would fall back to bang. So the bangs would only kind of originate from things of type bang.
Right, so if we're taking a look at the, let's see, taking a look at check expression return, we have, of course, unit at the moment. Seems.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how the code is set up right now, but that would be the idea. I think it could be done, but it would need exploration. So I guess we can structure the question by first asking, do we feel okay about doing nothing?
Well, at least this is a loud breakage, and I feel okay with it.
It's a loud breakage in the sense that it has to do with inference.
Yes.
It is, however, the kind of breakage that when we first said, let's stabilize bang, we kind of suggested we didn't think we'd run into any such breakage.
Right. It's sort of
that's a different issue.
I mean, to me, it's like, it's allowed, but it's still too much. It's allowed. Corner cases or a really strong case seems okay, but if there's many major crates affected, if nothing else, we need to prepare for it.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make an argument on whether it is too much or not too much. I'm just observing that it is not the amount that we expected when we said we wanted to stabilize this. We instead said that we thought with compiler tricks we could avoid there being any breakage, and that seems to not be the case.
I don't understand what that has. The case, the breakage we were talking about was the dynamic semantics, UB, not about static semantics. That's different. So I think those are unrelated.
I agree that, I think the point is it was unanticipated. Like,
yes. I think it was unanticipated by everyone. So I would agree. I would agree with that.
Okay. I mean, I don't feel okay with doing nothing.
I also don't feel okay with doing nothing.
So maybe so what are the things we can do? I mean, personally, I think I would advocate for, how much time, this is on nightly now?
2 weeks. Less than 2 weeks.
Is it on nightly or beta?
It's on nightly, I think. I can check.
I think, okay. I'm pretty sure it's on, the tag says nightly at least. I feel like the other concern I have is that this is, given that this is affecting crates in the ecosystem, people who are like using nightly are affected. That's how it came. When I said people reported it to me, what I really meant was, like, for example, Yehuda contacted me saying new shell won't build on the latest nightly. Cases like this.
Saying what won't build on the latest nightly, sorry?
New shell. But the point is, it's not that it affected projects directly, it affected them indirectly via transitive dependencies. And so then people have to not upgrade their nightlies to the newest one and so on. So it has a kind of trickle down effect, which is why I would prefer to keep nightly in a state that builds the ecosystem, which is why I personally would lean towards backing it out and trying to fix the type inference interaction. And I think
I'm not very excited about adding more complexity to the language in terms of having like one instead of having like if it's a transitory thing, okay, but if it's like a permanent thing, then that feels sound great.
I mean, in terms of having multiple forms of fallback, we already have integer fallback and non-integer, so it's, I don't know.
Yeah, but like it's.
Hold on, we didn't cover the other options that Simone wrote, and I think it's important we do that first because those are options that we may choose after we. Part of the reason to do 7 is to give us more time to make a choice, and so I think like the only choices are 2 and 4. I think is not the right way to look at this.
All right, well, let's go through them then. So we can. I think the other 2 have to do specifically with the infallible type, right? So we can either keep it as a distinct type, not an alias of bang, forever, or we can plan to change it in a later release, but that was something that we had ruled out previously because it has I forget why, but it has because it has something to do with coherence, right?
Just double checking
what it says right there.
Just double checking something. There isn't any way for us to, going by the earlier post in this thread saying that we can't have all three of this, this, and this. Is it accurate to say that we don't make type infallible ideas of?
I think you're dropping out. I'm not hearing what you're saying. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
No.
Is it accurate to say that if we don't make type infallible an alias for bang, then because try-from uses infallible as its error type, we wouldn't be able to unify between infallible and bang ever in the future, which means we couldn't use try-from and expect its type to be bang?
It would create other breakage, coherence-based breakage. And libs feels that they wouldn't want to do that. Wouldn't want to unify them in the future if we do that now.
So if we don't unify them now and we unify them in the future, it might technically be allowed under the amount of breakage that we consider acceptable for coherence, but it would probably be breakage we don't want.
It's not even allowed breakage.
I don't know. Josh, are you describing option number 6 in what you're describing right now? Because I can't tell if the scenario you're talking about is what Simon wrote as option 6.
I'm talking about options 5 and 6. Yes.
And specifically, the thing you're talking about is option 6.
Yes, I'm trying to understand, is that possible? Because I'm not sure I fully understand the context, so I was trying to get more information.
Well, Libs has written, TLibs discussed this before and considers it not acceptable under the stability promise, and would break stable code that separately implements a trait for both.
I'm reading that, yes.
Yeah, so I don't think, it only way, I mean, it could be something we did, you could imagine doing it if there don't exist any crate, if we think there don't exist any crates or something, but it would be like just a blatant breaking change.
Sure. Well, I think the other half of it is, I'm not sure what point there is in stabilizing this if we don't have this as an alias, because frankly, a huge reason we're stabilizing this is for try-from.
Right.
So if it doesn't work with try-from, kind of what was the point?
Is there a way to do option 6 except that, well, not option 6 exactly, but not option 6. I was just wondering to make them not aliases, but make try-from still work.
There might
coerce the other.
Like conceivably, you could imagine having empty enums be, or maybe some other form of uninhabited types being coercible to bang. I think there's some. It's not been something we've been super keen on in the past, but
I would like that. It makes sense.
It would be possible. I don't know exactly what it means for try-from to work. I mean, coercions are never perfect also. So like that might, for example, you would probably still want to add impulse both for infallible and for bang, so that of various traits and so on, so that things work more smoothly. But
it makes sense to me that like all initial objects are the same. From a category theoretical point of view, at least.
I don't know. I think it's the kind of it's a change. So I'm not too keen on it, both because I think new types have some use, but also because it's a bigger change in some ways. Like it's like to fix this one thing, we're opening a bigger door. And I also feel like coercion's never. It's always a leaky abstraction. Right?
Feels like a large decision in either case. It's not something that we can just like decide now.
Right. We don't. Yes, exactly.
So I think from a time perspective, options 2 and 4 are not feasible.
Hold on, let me make a list. So from a time perspective, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You're saying
there's no 8.
I know, and there's the 1. So 1 is considered unacceptable by at least some of us. 2, we're saying time doesn't seem sufficient.
Right, 2 right, but at the same time, we have to keep in mind there's 2 right now versus 2 after 7, right? 7 is actually a tree of possibilities.
Yeah,
after you do 7.
We're talking about for the first step, not the second.
Okay,
sure,
I just want to make sure we're clear about this.
Yeah, we're talking about what to do right
So
now.
how long would we have to do 2, and how feasible is that considered?
Two is we complete the mitigations. Well, I don't really know how long that would take. I don't actually think it would take that long if we. It's more.
I thought somebody already wrote a patch for obs.
I
guess it depends.
Started one, but I don't know how far.
I guess it depends on what you mean by complete the mitigations. Like we already have dynamic semantic checks. We have static checks in terms of the lint that Ralph wrote. The only thing we haven't implemented is a lint to detect fallback. You could say that the mitigations already exist in some sense. The only case I think that it doesn't catch is like transmuting a function pointer where the return type happens to be generic, and that happens to fall back to units, a unit, and suddenly it fallbacks to bang. But that seems very unlikely, like in practice.
Isn't that the one that should happen?
Yeah, but like that's the only one that happens.
Lightning never strikes twice, or something.
Like no one else can think. Usually more people can think.
I feel like there was a number of cases that were very similar to that, though they were detected relatively early. There was at least one other case that was similar, where we were casting a return type of a closure, if I recall, and it was causing UB. We were making a spot to store the return type from a closure we were calling, something like that. I guess it's not exactly the same though.
So and I guess implement so completing
really
the mitigations.
I think what you're arguing really is number 3, right? Like you're kind of arguing for let's just change the fallback, and it was good enough. We shouldn't have been so hesitant.
Well, yeah, but both feels differently about this, so I don't think, and they're not here, so I don't think we could move on that one, practically speaking, right now, right?
That seems right. I also feel I also have hesitations about this change. It feels, I don't know, gratuitous to me, but and we don't have any notion of the impact, full notion. Yes, we have a lot of notions. We don't have a full notion for the reason we just said. But
well, completing the transition. Well, that could be like, does it require just landing the lint? Does it mean like waiting a few months?
If nothing else, I'm not wild about making the change in the first, like shortly before beta is cut. Although you could think of worse times, but
right, but it's not something that we have the time to do. Basically, in 2 weeks. That's the conclusion. All right.
Completing the mitigations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 6 is considered unacceptable by TLibs. 5 is considered to give up on a major, 5 being don't unify exhaustive and Vang, give up on a major use case.
So I guess
only known way to recover would be making Vang and these things called uninhabited types, like intercoercible, to at least partially recover. That is a bigger piece of work with unknown end result.
It's not obvious that you can actually do that and preserve coherence without resulting in the same breakage of obst, by the way.
I mean, I don't know.
I didn't say not possible. I said not obvious.
Okay. I'm just not, I just feel like anytime we say we're going to use coercions to make things invisible, that's a lie. So it's going to work a lot of the time.
Save it for the lecture type theory with Nico.
So number 7, this is the buy time, but then we have to pick the next step. But yes.
We don't have to do it now.
I mean, we want bang.
Yeah, but I mean, we don't have to decide on the next step in this meeting. We could do it in the next meeting.
No, we don't.
And we don't have time for that in any case. We have 1 minute left, but we can perhaps take
right.
it. Well, seems like I'm the only one arguing for 1.
I think that's right.
Yeah. So I guess it's 7.
I think we should do 7, but I think we should definitely do. We don't want to just do 7 and stop. I want to land this. We have to do the next step then. But we don't.
Can someone else do the work, because I'm kind of bummed out and working on bang.
Yeah, that's fair.
We also need a release notes update as part of 7, explaining exactly why we're doing this and what direction we're moving towards, namely likely 2.
I don't think we have merged the release notes yet, so I don't think we need to do anything there.
We made a fair bit of noise about bang being on track to stabilization. We need to make at least a little bit of noise saying, sorry, it'll be a little while longer, here's why, and here is a understandable explanation of what went horribly wrong.
All right. Central, I'll find someone to do the work, or Felix and I will find someone. I think that's fair to say you don't feel like it. But
try my best.
You did a good effort. All right, y'all. I gotta go hard stop today.
I was actually joking on like on the reference on the reference repo that I wonder how long stabilization lasts. Sort of jinxed it.
I think the next step would indeed be to just put some more energy into this mitigation question and see if we can't find something that makes it right. That's the best solution. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you all later.
Bye.
Bye.